Welcome to Ali Fitness Podcast, a weekly production all about bringing health into fitness. With a degree in biochemistry and a doctorate in nutrition, Dr. Mike Roussell oversees the optimization of the health, nutrition, and performance of a range of clientele, from professional athletes to celebrities to Technology 500 executives. He's the author of 3 popular books, an adjunct assistant professor at Pennsylvania State University, serves on the advisory board for Men's Health, Shape Magazine, and Livestrong.com, and in his spare time, he educates physicians, dietitians, nurses, and other health professionals on the most recent advances in nutritional treatments for cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, and weight loss. And there's many, many other things that he does. But thank you so much for coming on the show, Dr. Mike.
Thank you so much for having me. You can introduce me any day, actually. That was extremely nice.
I couldn't actually have said everything that you do. You just mentioned that you just got back from California. What was that for?
So I do some work with the American Pistachio Growers, which is basically like a nonprofit organization of all people who grow pistachios in America. I help them with their research programs, help them figure out good ways to communicate the science that they're funding and they're looking at to people so they can understand the health benefits of pistachios.
Wow. So it would have been better if I just had mentioned things that you don't do in the introduction. It would have been quicker. So just a big shout out to James H., an awesome PT here in Manhattan, who you've helped tremendously. So he recommended you and put me in touch with you. So big shout out to James.
Yeah, very cool.
And so I guess, Dr. Mike, I want to start with, your personal journey and where your interest of nutrition and health began.
Yep. So I think nutrition is something that I've always been interested in. I think my personal health journey probably started when I was a young kid. I grew up in rural Vermont, so in the country. And so just very active, like running in the woods, biking everywhere. Like as a kid, if you wanted to go to the store, I got on my bike and biked 3 miles to go to the general store. And so, I was just always very active as a kid, into sports a lot. And when I went to high school, I stayed very active and played all kinds of sports. And then went to college and thought I wanted to be a physician. So I was pre-med and got a degree in biochemistry, and then went to medical school at the University of Vermont. And kind of throughout that whole time as my youth, I blew out my knee and got into weightlifting and fitness and bodybuilding that way. I remember thinking I'm not going to be able to run for 6 months, so I might as well find something else to do. And that's really how I got into weightlifting. As a kid, you can just really get into the culture. I was so into the weightlifting culture. Your listeners are familiar with Iron Mind. They produce a great magazine. I think it's quarterly, and they have strength conditioning equipment. And, the guy who ran Iron Mind pioneered things like the communication of, he wrote these books about breathing squats. And so I remember, breathing squats, I don't know if you're familiar with this. It's you basically get a weight that you can squat for 10 reps, and then you squat it for 20 reps. And so your last 10 reps are 1 rep every, several seconds, because you're huffing and puffing breathing. And so one summer did that, and just kind of this, traditional, add a little bit of, weight to the bar every session, try to get 1 more rep approach. And I think that's actually kind of translated into my approach to life and nutrition. So I went to medical school and wasn't really into medicine. I've always kind of been one that has an allergic reaction to authority at some level. And definitely, didn't like kind of the set paths of medicine. I kind of entrepreneurial at heart. And there also wasn't a lot of nutrition. It's a lot more, pharmacology and a lot more drugs and a lot more bureaucracy than I was into. I had a thing really for the science. And so I chose to leave medical school, which is a tough decision. You're the first person in your family, go to become a real doctor. And then you want to leave after a year. It's kind of a hard family move. My wife was awesome. I dragged her all the way to Vermont. And I'm now let me drag you down to central Pennsylvania. And she was always super supportive. So I went and ended up going to Penn State to get my PhD in nutrition. And while I was there, I was able to work with and work under a woman named Penny Chris Atherton, who is one of the top nutrition researchers in the area of cardiovascular disease in the world. And I really didn't know how lucky I was to work in her group till I got there and kind of got a full grasp of kind of who she was and the breadth of her research and stuff. That's also kind of at that point when I was a graduate student, my wife and I had twins. We actually had 3 kids when I was in graduate school. And so, graduate students don't actually get paid very much, which is probably not surprising. I needed to kind of, find some extra income to feed these kids and buy diapers. And so that's when I started my nutrition consulting business. So I was going to graduate school and I was doing research on cardiovascular disease nutrition, and then, started freelance writing in the areas of athletic performance and body composition and weight loss, and started writing books, creating programs, speaking. And then when I graduated, I just decided to put all my chips in that area and just kind of been rolling with it ever since.
Wow. I knew you'd bring up squats because I've got to say that I have never seen a doctor with legs like yours. Amazing. Massive. So I knew squats would come into the conversation. I didn't realize so early, but amazing.
Yeah, and squats and deadlifts. Fitness is interesting, like especially now, like there's so much technology and there's like everybody's got this new method and all sorts of things. And it makes me kind of feel old school. I remember one summer when I was in college, this kid was on the football team and he was going into his senior year, and he knew that I knew some stuff about nutrition and training, and he needed to get bigger. He was a tight end. And I was like, all right, let's do this, because I was there doing research for the summer. I was like, just do everything I say, let's see what happens. And so he agreed. We did this, I'm trying to think. Oh, the book's called Beyond Brawn. It's an old weightlifting book that is basically big movements, squats, deadlifts, not a lot of work, not a lot of volume, but focused on the progression. And so that summer we worked up. I squatted more than I've ever in my life. I squatted 550 for 2 that summer. And this kid, Jeremy, got so big that when he showed up to training camp, they drug tested him on the second day. Because they thought that, because they just didn't believe the progress he had made. So, I'm a big believer in kind of, squats and deadlifts for sure. Actually, before we did this call, I was setting up a new squat rack in my garage.
I guess that leads me to my next question. What does your sort of fitness regime look like?
So right now, I've trained out of my, garage now for almost a year. And it was kind of by accident. It was more just, there was a lot of lost time kind of traveling to and from the gym. So I just started training at home. And I started out like I didn't have very much equipment, and I've just kind of slowly built it in over time. I have an Airdyne bike, which I got off Craigslist. There's a great strength coach named Mike Boyle. And I remember he said one day at a seminar, he's like, what you need to do is, he goes, just go to Craigslist, and he goes, get an Airdyne bike. He's like, you can probably get it for $100 because everybody buys them. They use them. They realize how miserable it is, and then they sell them. So there are a lot of them on Craigslist. So I went and I got one for $100 on Craigslist. And so that, and I have a ski erg from Concept 2. And those are kind of my 2 cardio pieces in my gym. And I got a bunch of kettlebells, just got a squat rack, trap bar. It's weights 3 days a week, and then cardio 3 days a week, usually some interval cardio. And then at least once a week, I like to get in like a low intensity workout, like low intensity cardio for about 60 to 90 minutes as kind of a recovery session. Right now is a little bit different. I'm in the middle of a 30-day Airdyne conditioning program, which basically has me doing intervals that are anywhere from 20 to 45 minutes on the Airdyne every other day. And so that's pretty miserable, but it's a good test of will. So that's why I'm doing it.
That sounds intense.
It is. It's really intense.
And your 3 weight days, are they full body weight sessions?
Yeah. Yep. Full body. So I basically will do some variation off of this. It's usually a heavy lift, and I would say heavy lift like 4 to 6 reps for anywhere between, say, 3 to 6 sets. And then it's pairings of a lower body exercise. So I'll kind of rotate, say like bench, deadlift, and squat would be the heavy movements. And then I'll pair exercises in almost not totally superset, but maybe like a 45-second difference, where it'll be like an upper body push, and then a hip dominant leg movement, and then another upper body push, and then another maybe quad dominant leg movement, and then finish off with, accessory work like arms or something like that, or ab or core. And then the other days I'll do, instead of the push, I'll do a pull. So it's kind of like, it's all full body, and then it alternates kind of upper body.
And do you spend much time on mobility?
Not as much as I should. That's actually 2018 is the year of mobility. It's one of those things where I've always talked about, as much as I love physical activity, I mean, most of my days are spent working at a desk, unfortunately. That's just kind of how it is. Like I always would laugh with my personal trainer friends. Like I live in Western New York. I have clients in California. Like I have clients in New York City. Like I have clients in, all over the place, Florida. And I would joke that like the good thing about nutrition is I don't have to watch anybody eat. But, I think the downfall of that is also I'm on my butt on my computer a lot. So even though kind of health and fitness is my life's work, like I have to put a lot of work into making sure I also, get it in and make it a priority. So I've found like kind of over the years of the desk sitting that my hips are like, no, they need a lot of work on mobility. So I've spent a lot of work on that. It's about 10 minutes before every training session.
Not enough, not enough. So what are your goals?
I would say 10 minutes before every training session is a lot better than 0 minutes before every training
I
session.
agree. Everything's relative, right?
It's a ton.
That's true. And so what are your actual goals around fitness?
So it's kind of like, it sounds like a cheeky goal, but it's truly my goal is when my kids are on the playground and they have the my dad could beat up your dad conversation, like I want them to always win that conversation.
That's great.
I've at different times like had different fitness goals, like wanted to be really lean or like wanted to be really strong. Like, one winter I was like, I never deadlifted 500 pounds. I want to pull 500 pounds. That was the big goal. I think it's like the picture I sent you was from that training cycle when I was trying to pull 500 pounds. And so it's kind of changed over the years, but I would say for the last 2 or 3 years, it's kind of been a focus of just overall fitness. Like I want to be able to lift heavy weights, but at the same time, like if I need to go run 3 miles, like I want to be able to do that no problem.
And of course, beat up your kid's dad.
Yes, and of course, yeah, because I think a lot of what I've found kind of as a father is, and also with fitness, is that your kids are always watching you. And so really my goal is to embody the fitness life that I write and talk about as much as possible, because I know that they're watching and, like they want to go in the garage and get on the ski erg. And like, I went in the garage the other day and my older son, who's 9, he was like on the Airdyne. I'm like, what 9-year-old wants to get on an Airdyne, right? But when you see your dad do it every other day for a month, like you're like, oh, maybe I'll do that. So, I think my goal is really to be, kind of as all around healthy as possible, while also kind of setting a good example for what I call it a strong, fit, and healthy life, what that looks like.
Awesome. And I mean, I know we're getting a bit personal here, but everyone always wants to know what the nutritionist does. So I guess I'd love to know what your pre and post sort of nutrition look like.
You're right. Everybody wants to know what the nutritionist does. Like earlier this week when I was in California, I was at a dinner and I was talking with somebody and he was like, oh, you're a nutritionist. I was like, yeah. And he goes, so you're probably drinking water. I'm like, well, it's actually vodka, but like everybody wants to know what the nutritionist is drinking. But my pre and post workout nutrition's changed a lot.
I should add a caveat too, that most accountants aren't very good at doing their accounting and landscape artists have the worst backyards. So take this with a grain of salt, right?
No. Like that's what's interesting about nutrition is funny. I mean, it is very important. And I think at a visceral level, like part of my commitment to living and being healthy is because if I'm going to talk about it and kind of make a living helping other people do that, then I need to also do it myself.
Absolutely.
That's a huge discussion amongst personal trainers and amongst nutritionists, kind of the whole thing is if you are an out of shape personal trainer, like what is that? Like that's such a hot topic. And I think it's very personal. And just for me, I think there's kind of I think you need to live your best strong, fit, and healthy life for you if you're going to be in this profession.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, I am going to enjoy a vodka soda, when I'm out having dinner.
Of course. And of course, it's quite clear too that you want to be a good example for your children. So of course, you're going to eat well.
Yeah, totally. So I would say with my pre and post workout nutrition, it's changed a lot over the years. I really think that's fine because as research changes or as more research comes out, then we kind of evolve our understanding of what is effective, what is necessary, what's going to get you to your goal. So for me, I usually train first thing in the morning. So I'll get up, I'll have a cup of coffee, and then I'll train. Or maybe sometimes I get to train after the kids. So I usually get up around 5. And maybe some mornings I'll train after the kids go to school. So it'll be around 8:30. I generally won't eat. I would say the last 6 to 8 months, I technically am training fasted other than the coffee. I've just found that I no longer can stomach kind of food before. And I used to do like a pre-workout for the caffeine. And now I just enjoy coffee. So I'd rather have a cup of coffee than kind of a pre-workout supplement. One of the things I do take is Beat Elite. I get that in about 30 minutes before my workout. And what that is, it's basically concentrated beets and it's for the nitrates. And so there's some really interesting research about those nitrates increasing nitric oxide and improving blood flow to the muscles. So from an exercise performance standpoint, it was traditionally generally used with people who are endurance athletes, but there's some new research looking at high intensity exercise and showing its benefits there. And I think whatever you can, even in a high intensity kind of a weightlifting scenario, if you can vasodilate and you can increase blood flow, what you're doing is not only are you increasing blood flow to the muscles, but you're also increasing the ability of your body to clear metabolic waste. If that hose is bigger, not only can nutrients get in, but the metabolic waste can get out and get cleared. Everything I think now I look at through the lens of like, what are the other health repercussions? And there's some interesting data on blood pressure and cardiovascular health with these kind of natural occurring nitrates, like the ones found in beets. So that beet elite I'll take before, and then afterwards, it is about 10 grams of branched chain amino acids right away, and then within a half an hour of like an actual breakfast, which I'm pretty standard. Like I like the same thing often because it's hard to screw it up. And so for the last maybe 2 months, my go-to breakfast is half a cup of raw oats cooked with a cup of water, a cup of blueberries, 3 eggs, and a glass of plain kefir.
What's your opinion on caffeine before a workout? There's been some very recent studies. I think actually one of the studies that came out was on animals. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, and I'll put it in the show notes. And it was basically suggesting that caffeine before cardio workouts is not conducive to, I guess, cardio workouts in terms of building your cardiovascular muscles and what have you.
My general feeling on caffeine is I consume so much that I don't actually think it impacts me anymore. So I 100% believe that it's a placebo because my habituation to caffeine is I'm like a 5 cups of coffee a day kind of person. I just enjoy it. And so caffeine is one of the things that you habituate to really quick. So you don't get that effect. You don't get the stimulatory effect, unlike something like teacrine, which is a really popular stimulant over the last 12 to 18 months. It's just exploded. It was kind of brought to market by a colleague of mine, Dr. Hector Lopez. There's no habituation to that. So you basically can take teacrine like every day and you still get that same stimulatory effect. But with caffeine, you habituate pretty quickly. And even the research shows that if you want the endurance effect, because I'm not familiar with the study that you're referencing, but there's a fair amount of research in the endurance arena showing that it does improve exercise performance. There's less when it comes to weightlifting. It's more mixed, although I just saw actually yesterday a new meta-analysis about caffeine and strength training, which I haven't had the chance to read yet, so I can't really comment on it. I would say generally, if you want the effect from caffeine, it's not something you can drink on a regular basis. You need to wean yourself off of it if you want to then have the effect. Like when we had our last child, I gave up caffeine for a month leading up to it because I knew I needed the effects of caffeine once our 4th was born. So I could actually get that boost so I could, work from 11 to 2 a.m. when everybody was asleep.
Nice.
So no, I think caffeine's a great supplement. I think if you really want to be honest about actually getting the effects, that you need to use it intermittently, which is just not generally how people consume it.
Okay. And just a quick question on the Beet Elite that you take. Would that be before any type of workout? So whether it be cardio or weights?
So I take it, it's traditionally been used for cardio, but I take it before both. And it takes about 30 to 45 minutes to start working, and it actually lasts for 4 to 6 hours. So you could take it before. I think the additional health benefit makes it an everyday supplement for me.
Interesting. And you mentioned that you ate a meal, your breakfast, about 30 minutes after a workout. Is that because you're hungry, or is there other reasons for doing that?
Combination of both, especially if I don't train until after my kids get to school. So maybe I start my workout around 8:30. And then if it's an hour, it'll be 9:45, 10 o'clock. And I'm a huge breakfast person. So if it's 10 o'clock and I haven't eaten yet, I'm going to be really hungry. But one of the reasons is, so I use a branched chain amino acid supplement right after exercise. And, the last 6 to 8 months, there's been, I think, some interesting scientific revelations about branched chain amino acid supplements, which are, one of the most popular sports supplements now. They've kind of really exploded in popularity over the last decade or so. And basically what the research kind of was showing or suggesting is that branched chain amino acids are inferior from a muscle building and recovery standpoint to whole proteins. And that, kind of this constant supplementation with branched chain amino acids that has really taken the fitness place by storm is probably not giving the benefit that everybody thinks it is. And part of the reason is one of the branched chain amino acids is leucine. So leucine is a specific amino acid that essentially flips on muscle building at the cellular level. But when you supplement with just branched chain amino acids, you're only giving your body certain amino acids. So in order to kind of build proteins, your body needs access to all kinds of amino acids. So while leucine turns on the switch, you don't have all the blocks. It's like if you wanted to build a Lego castle, right? Leucine turns the light on in the room so you can see what you're doing. But then if you only have 3 different kinds of Legos, you're not going to be able to build the castle. And that's kind of the rub with branched chain amino acids, is that you need all your essential amino acids present there to maximize that muscle building process. Like branched chain amino acid supplements are delicious. They're more like a sports drink than like a whey protein shake, which is more like a milkshake. And so right after exercise, it's a lot easier for me to stomach.
So basically what you're saying is you ignore the science and go with the taste.
No. So that's why I stagger my breakfast. That's the point where I'm getting at, is that I will take in the branched chain amino acids right after exercise, right? And so those are free form amino acids that get digested very quickly. And so my blood leucine levels spike within 20 minutes, and that will flip on or kind of turn on the muscle building process. And then I follow it up with a whole food meal that will contain the complement of amino acids that my body needs through the eggs, the oats, and the kefir, to kind of round out my body's amino acid needs to help fully support that muscle building. And I think that's the best approach to use a branched chain amino acid supplement based on the current research. If you want to do it a different way, you could just have a whey protein shake and then not worry about breakfast or any of those other things. So that's kind of my personal strategy and kind of the thought process behind it.
Awesome. And what are your thoughts about that time that you have to supplement or eat, get protein, get carbs into your body to benefit? There's different views on that, and recent science, I guess, has shown that that window is actually not 20 to 30 minutes as advertised by protein companies, but it's more like 6 to 8 hours. Or what's your opinion on that?
So I think carbohydrates and protein would be 2 kind of separate things. When you look at carbohydrates, what we're looking at is kind of your body's ability to replenish its glycogen stores, glycogen just being how your body stores sugar in your muscles. And directly after exercise, your body is extremely efficient at replenishing those glycogen stores. So your body's really good. And there is a time-dependent decline. It's something like within 60 minutes, its ability to do that drops by 50%, right? So there's totally a fall off in your body's ability to replenish glycogen stores right after exercise. The nuance piece to that is you got to think, do I need to rapidly replenish my glycogen stores? And if it's kind of the average person looking to get fit, right? Or even me, replenishing my glycogen stores right after exercise isn't as much of a priority, because I'm going to eat carbohydrates later in the day. I'm probably not going to train for another 24 hours. There's a longer time period for me to replenish those sugar stores in my muscles. And if I'm doing a weight training workout and it's 45 minutes, there's no way I'm fully depleting my muscle glycogen stores anyway. Like, you really have to work. If you've ever done like a glycogen depletion protocol, it's royally miserable. Like, it's very hard. So the time where I really only use simple carbohydrates right after exercise is with athletes who are engaged in very intensive training cycles. Like, I used to have this professional athlete that I worked with for a while before he retired, and he would get up and he would do a shoot around, and then he would lift weights for an hour and a half or so, and then he would go to a Brazilian jiu-jitsu gym and roll and box for another 2 hours. So for him, like, getting in, carbohydrates right after his weight training session was, a top priority, because he'd already been training for 3 or 3.5 hours, and he was going to go do another 2-hour session. So that became really important. And then replenishing after his martial arts session was really important, because he was coming back at it to do it the next day, because he did it like 5 or 6 days a week. So in those situations, you have athletes that are doing 2-a-days, even like a single training sessions, but you're doing it 6 days a week and they're long and intensive. That's really important. But for someone who's training, say 3 or 4 times a week, maybe 5 times a week for an hour at a time, getting in carbohydrates right after exercise isn't as much of a priority. I'd actually rather have them eat whole food carbohydrate sources so they can get fiber and they can get other nutrients. And also, generally, people are in a situation where, they're trying to eat less. I found you're always more successful when you can encourage people to eat more. So if you're going to drink 30 to 50 grams of a carbohydrate drink right after exercise, that's like a cup of cooked rice that you can't eat later. And most people, if the effect is the same, would prefer to eat the rice than drink the drink. So that's kind of where I've gone with carbohydrate supplementation post-exercise.
And what's your take on protein after exercise? Is there a window?
I interpret the research as it's a combination of both. And that there is several studies showing that if you can get a peak in your blood amino acid levels shortly after exercise, that there's an additive effect to kind of that muscle building stimulus. So you can get this by either eating, let's say you train for like an hour. So if you eat like a solid protein meal, something about 30 grams of protein, which for most people at like a lunch or dinner scenario is very easy. An hour and a half or so before training, those amino acids are going to peak in your bloodstream around the time when your workout's over. That kind of is the way to do it. Or you could have like a protein shake, like a whey protein shake or any sort of other protein shake directly after exercise. Those get into your bloodstream really fast, so you can get that similar effect. I think that is an important piece to do. But, saying outside of that, protein is still really important because when you train with weights or when you exercise, your body has an increased capacity to build and repair muscle for something like 24 to 48 hours. So regularly consuming protein throughout the day, like at all your meals, is an important habit to have. So, for most people, if you're doing that, if you're eating protein at every meal and you have either that pre-workout solid protein or post-workout liquid protein, that's going to cover all your bases. And you don't generally need to make it more complicated than that.
Awesome. You're famous for having a unique approach to nutrition because of the scientifically derived yet practical approach. Can you explain how you do that or what that looks like?
I think I'm able to do it just through a lot of practice. Part of it was when I was a graduate student at Penn State, I ran what's called a controlled feeding study. With those kinds of studies, chefs and graduate students cook, weigh, and measure all the food for people. Show up in the morning, the study subject weighs himself, they get served breakfast, then they get a cooler with all their food for the day. They show up the next morning, repeat the process. So everything is weighed and measured. And if you want to really test how something works in nutrition, controlled feeding studies are the way to go. Right? Because you can control everything that's going into the person and then you measure their blood afterwards and you can see how it changes. I saw that and I'm like, man, this is it's really easy to change, reduce people's risk for cardiovascular disease. Or, before I went to graduate school, I was very into the fitness and bodybuilding community where those people are very militant, right? That's a militant community where it's if you need to eat 200 grams of protein a day, you're going to do it. And then as I started transitioning and working with people who weren't bodybuilders or more hardcore fitness people who weren't in these controlled feeding studies, what I found was it's life that gets in the way. Life gets in the way of actually executing the program. So I needed to find better ways of explaining what are the key principles here based on science and why do people need to do them. And so it's just kind of through practice and repetition, seeing what kinds of metaphors or ideas resonate with people, motivate people, trigger those aha moments. I think a lot of it too has to do with the basic understanding of biochemistry. So my undergraduate degree is in chemistry with a concentration in biochemistry. Biochemistry is so important. And I took biochemistry classes as an undergraduate. I took them in medical school. I took them in graduate school. I've taken a lot of biochemistry in my life. And I really think if you're kind of going into nutrition or fitness or health related field, having a good understanding of biochemistry is really important because it's a set number of principles that essentially dictate how the whole body works. And so I can look at something, a research study or something that someone writes that's talking about nutrition or how the body works and quickly kind of do my biochemical litmus test. Does that actually make sense at a biochemical level? And what you generally find is a lot of stuff people talk about, it just doesn't make sense at the biochemical level. And so I have trouble kind of buying in or believing that. And so my approach has always been figure out, how it makes sense at the basic level and then just distill it, but don't dumb it down when you're communicating it. And I think that's a really key piece.
Yeah. So you must get this all the time. How should I eat? Is there a one size fits all approach?
Yes. My wife laughs. That's the question I hate the most. Let me tell you what I ate today and tell me what I should eat now. Right? Right?
Or should I be vegan or should I be keto or should I be this?
Yeah. And it is definitely a question that I get all the time. I think there are a set of principles that are universal, and then how you go about executing on that is totally up to you. The problem with most kind of fad or popular diets is in order to be really successful, they need to be really polarizing. It needs to be, this is the good thing that solves all the problems, and don't do any of this ever because that was what was causing all the issues. Any sort of those extreme diets, like a ketogenic diet, right? It's carbohydrates are the problem, avoid them like crazy, eat all these things, they're amazing, right? With a vegan diet, it's, animal products are the problem, eat the plant-based products. The polarizing diets, they speak to human nature, in a way that makes people think oh yeah, that makes sense. But the more polarizing and restrictive a diet is, the harder it is to follow. And, really what works, like I call them the 6 pillars of nutrition. And I think if you take the 6 pillars of nutrition, you can then apply it to any of these diet concepts that you want to, right? If you want to eat a paleo diet, that's fine. Like, do you need to not consume dairy or beans? Like, you don't have to, but if you choose to eat paleo, you can make it work. And I think that's how it is with most diets. And so with the 6 pillars of nutrition, it's eat multiple meals a day. So breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a snack. Consume protein at every meal, consume fruits or vegetables at every meal, minimize overly processed foods and foods with added sugars. Don't drink calories, but drink water and tea instead. And time your carbohydrates around your activity levels. Right. So those are kind of the 6 pillars of nutrition. And I think you could take those concepts, which are really grounded in a lot of science, and then apply them to, any diet that you really want to. Like if you want to follow a vegan diet, totally fine. Like I had, a handful of, not a lot, but some vegan clients over the years. And I said, that's totally fine, whether you want to be vegetarian or vegan, but it doesn't change your body's biochemical needs. Like you still need these regular doses of protein throughout the day. And it's just going to be a little more difficult to do that following a vegan or vegetarian diet. So let's spend more time troubleshooting how you're going to make that happen. And I think that's kind of the approach that I always take, with clients.
And have those 6 pillars changed for you over time? I guess, Dr. Mike, when you first started and now, has your thoughts on nutrition changed much?
Less than I expected, but they have some. So I would say when I first kind of came up with the 6 pillars, it was probably 2005 or 2006. And I would say the first pillar of meal frequency, and when I look at the first book I ever wrote was called Your Naked Nutrition Guide, and that was 6 to 8 meals a day. So it was the meal frequency was a lot greater, and that is a lot less. I would say the initial iteration of the 6 pillars was a little more strongly recommended carbohydrates first thing in the morning and then after exercise. And then kind of as nutrient timing research started to come out, I would less emphasize carbs in the morning and more just kind of focused around exercise. But I would say in the last, year, 12 months or so, 8 to 12 months, I've spent a lot more time reading about and studying circadian rhythms and how they impact biology, and have become a bigger proponent of carbohydrates first thing in the morning as a way of entraining your circadian rhythm. They haven't changed as much. It's kind of a little bit of a nuanced thing, kind of as we've learned. Meal frequency, I think is a big one. We've just kind of come to understand that eating more frequently, it's not as satiating because you're eating smaller amounts, and that satiety is driven a lot by meal size. So if you eat larger meals less frequently, that's going to be more filling and more satiating. And that also you need to time how you're having your protein. So consuming protein-rich meals closer than every 4 hours isn't going to allow for an optimal situation for supporting muscle growth and recovery, because research suggests that you need a flux of amino acid levels. You need to eat protein, your blood amino acid levels go up, stimulate that muscle building and recovering signal, and then they go down again. And then you eat again, and then they go up. If you're constantly eating, then they just stay elevated all the time, and that's not ideal.
Interesting. And so I guess there's so much conflicting evidence to say that this is the right diet or that's the right diet. It's almost like a religion for people now. Can you give our listeners some advice, I guess, to avoid any overwhelm?
I think it has become very cultish, lots of dietary approaches. Part of it has to do with, I think people say, there's a lot of conflicting evidence, because I think it's every new research study that is published, a couple things happen. There are lots of research studies that get published that no one ever knows about, right? So there's really like a handful that get a lot of publicity. And then that one is always positioned as the definitive study. Whereas the scientific approach is that becomes then another piece of evidence in this greater body of evidence that you would look at. So like one new study comes out, like that's not totally going to change my view on something. It's going to say, okay, now let's look at that in relationship to everything else we know. Just because a study came out 5 years ago, that doesn't make it less valid than a new study. Like human biology is the same. And so I think that's where, and the media pushes a lot more, nutrition news than it ever has. And new news in health and fitness gets pushed every day. Whereas, when I was a kid, I'd read Muscle and Fitness and it came out once a month, and now it's like every 6 hours, there's something new, that you need to hear about. I always laugh that, nutrition and fitness is the original fake news. fake news has become a popular term currently, but nutrition and fitness has been fake news for much longer. But I think the key for people to, back to your question, how do you wade through these things, is that you need to really focus on what are you doing kind of on a daily basis, and are you controlling that? I think you really need to control your meals and what you're having on a day-to-day basis. And if you're doing that consistently, so the first piece is you pick your plan and then you put it into play consistently. And if that works, just keep going with it. There's no need to seek out some other amazing solution. But I think where people get confused, and what I see from clients time and time again, is that they kind of half apply dietary principles. They don't get the results that they want. And then they read something and they're like, oh, this is the reason why, because I'm not doing new diet X, that's why I'm not getting the results. When in actuality, the results aren't there because you're not following the plan enough. You're not sticking to it enough. So they'll go off and try this new diet because that's the current solution. And that's really where people get into a lot of trouble. I have a talk that I give called Troubleshooting Your Weight Loss. And I break it down into two categories. It's either you're not doing or it's not working. And the first thing that you look at is always not doing. Are you not doing what you think you're doing? Because what I generally find is that people are not as adherent to their diets as they think, and they're not consuming the amounts of foods that they think in their minds. And so once you've kind of figured out that you are doing exactly what you think you're doing, then you can start to troubleshoot, is this diet working or not? How do I need to manipulate things? But a lot of the confusion comes from people searching for a solution when they haven't really put a test to what they're currently doing.
Do you think that's why those polarizing diets work so well, because they actually have such strict guidelines that they do something and they do it well?
Yes, totally. If you look at things like Beachbody, right, which is a very popular fitness regime, and they have a very strict, stringent kind of shake supplement protocol. Would I ever recommend that program from a nutritional, this is the best thing for you to do nutritionally? No, it just doesn't work that way. However, people who are into it, they buy into it really. And so their buy-in and their consistency really drives results, even in the face of less than optimal, nutritional strategy. And so something like, I think a ketogenic diet is perfect, right? I've been a scientific proponent of low carb diets for as long as I've been into nutrition. Initially I read one of the most kind of books that got me into nutrition was The Zone by Barry Sears, which I'll go and talk to college students now and they have no idea who that is. It's amazing to me. But so Barry Sears was the original, was more like a 40-30-30. So it's 40% calories from carbohydrates, which when he came out with that, it was like blasphemy to eat that low, right? That 40% calories from carbohydrates was low. But, so there's him, and then there was, Atkins, and then there's Mario Di Pasquale with the anabolic diet, which is a cyclic ketogenic diet. I've been very interested in kind of studying ketogenic diets at the scientific level for a long time. And over the last 5 years, it's just blown my mind how popular it's become. And I think part of it is that polarizing nature, is that it's look, you can't eat any of this stuff. Just do this. And what I find, because you see it when the media reports on professional athletes who are on ketogenic diets. I remember it was a summer or two ago, LeBron James was on a ketogenic diet, except he was eating, chicken salads with a mango cut up and put in his salad, which is it's going to give him 60 grams of carbohydrates. So there's no way he was on a ketogenic diet. But it's polarizing and it's simplified and it's look, here's the bucket that you can eat from, nothing out of here. And so people will do that and then they'll get results. But I'll tell you, to follow a strict ketogenic diet, to eat 70 to 75% of your calories from fat on a day in, day out basis, it's really difficult. Even for someone who has a lot of discipline, it's just very restricted. You're eating spinach, asparagus, and mushrooms and artichokes. You're very limited. I would say the longest stretch I've had on a ketogenic diet was probably 6 months. In the end, I was kind of I enjoy eating other things. I enjoy eating apples and blueberries. If I'm going to kind of chase after this blood ketone level, benchmark, I can't do those things. And I wasn't convinced that I was that much healthier as a result. And I think there's, data in a variety of places to show that, you're just as healthy on a carbohydrate restricted diet, maybe 30% calories from carbohydrates, than you are on a very, very low ketogenic diet.
I guess the similarity with all these sort of polarizing diets is they all take out processed food. So maybe that's the key.
Well, I do think that is a huge key, because I have yet to find someone who says, I'm on a ketogenic diet And then I talk to them and think, wow, they actually are on a ketogenic diet, right? It's generally someone says, oh, I'm on a ketogenic diet, and they're eating a low carb diet, which basically means no processed foods. They eat meat and they eat vegetables. And
I guess it depends on how they define it. I mean, if you're going to really define it, you've got to say it's less than 50 grams of carbs, I guess. But a lot of people don't really define it like that.
That's totally true. So I think where you run into problems is you're like, well, a ketogenic diet is less than 15% of calories from carbohydrates or less than 50 grams of carbohydrates per day. So that would be the definition. And so people would refer to research studies. Ketogenic diet does this and ketogenic diet does that. And then they say, well, I'm on a ketogenic diet and they're eating 100 grams of carbohydrates a day. There is forever a disconnect between what research studies and then how people interpret it. But part of it, I think you're totally right. I mean, does it really matter at the end of the day? Not for that individual, because if they're eating vegetables at every meal and they're not eating processed foods with added sugars, then that's the win, you know? And I do think that proteins become a lot more popular mainstream. Like I think in fitness, protein's always been popular. Proteins become a lot more popular mainstream, you know, even with dietary guidelines, which as flawed as they are, have started to appreciate protein for other than giving you your essential amino acid dose so you're not deficient. You know, that researchers are starting to really appreciate that there is something beneficial to protein, like it impacts brain function and controls appetite and helps reduce blood pressure. Like, you know, there are a lot of great things about protein. I think hopefully my hope for nutrition moving forward is that fiber is going to get a little more love. You know, with all these carbohydrate restricted diets becoming a lot more popular, I think people are really neglecting fiber. And I think that that's the other key. Adequate, optimal protein and sufficient fiber, those are really the two keys to eating healthy. Because to get enough fiber, you need to eat a lot of vegetables, you need to eat some whole grains. And I mean like real whole grains like brown rice or something like that, not like Cocoa Puffs that say they're made with whole grains. But, you know, like you need to eat fiber-rich carbohydrates. And that if you're focusing on eating fiber-rich carbohydrates and proteins at every meal, you're going to not be hungry, you'll lose weight, you'll be healthier. Like I think it can be that simple.
Do you think there's much merit now? There's a lot of DNA testing that says based on your DNA, you should eat X amount, this percentage of fat, and you're more of a fat metabolizer than a carb metabolizer. What's your opinion on that?
I'm very skeptical at this point of that. Like I've done a bunch of those, like I had my DNA sequenced and I, you know, paid for a couple different companies to run their nutritional analysis on it. And I found that the data that they were using to justify their claims was lacking. You know, so they would make a very strong claim of you're a fat metabolizer, you need to eat more fats, less carbohydrates. And then when you look at the references that they were using to support those, the references were not as strong as their claims. I don't think we're really there yet. I think for people using blood sugar and like fasting blood sugar or an oral glucose tolerance test is a much better barometer for carbohydrate intake than a DNA test. I think that we're going to get more information, you know, probably soon in the future that's useful from our DNA, but currently for most people it's lacking. There are a couple, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but there was a service that I used because it was recommended by a colleague of mine who's a naturopath, and it gets more at vitamin deficiencies due to certain genetic profiles. I found that to be fascinating, but it was over my head. It took a lot of time for me to kind of interpret and figure it out. So it's not generally useful to just somebody trying to get in shape.
Interesting. Now, can you tell us a bit about your recent book, The MetaShred Diet? Can you give us a bit of a hint about what that diet entails?
Yeah. So, you know, it's kind of funny when Men's Health asked me to write like a rapid weight loss diet, because as I was just talking about, one of the things that I dislike about weight loss diets, that like popular weight loss diets, is they all need some polarizing hook. My view is like, you don't need to, this like good and bad stuff is the problem. So how do I write a weight loss book that doesn't do that, right? Really what the MetaShred diet is about is it's about optimizing the type and the amount of calories and macronutrients that you're eating to maximize weight loss and also control your appetite and do it in a way that it's enjoyable. I've written a bunch of diet programs for rapid weight loss over the years, and the MetaShred diet is the best version of that by far. You know, we've had people lose 20 pounds in a month on the program. It's really phenomenal. And basically what it is it looks at, in the book in the beginning, it talks about how low fat, calorie controlled diets, you know, have worked, right? And low carbohydrate diets have worked that don't control calories, but they've also not worked. And so it looks kind of at the good and bad of both. And then MetaShred diet basically marries the good parts of both those approaches into an easy to follow diet. So what I did was created these meal templates. So you walk through a simple kind of calculation to figure out your calorie level, or what I call your meta diet level in the book, and just kind of A through F. And then that tells you like you need to eat, say, 2 large meals, 1 small meal, and a snack. And then it's broken down into 2 phases. So you just go to phase 1 and you can literally pick any breakfast. Like I went through and I made every breakfast is essentially nutritionally identical. Because one of the things that I found, and we were talking about this before, it's like the execution that people get hung up on. And people enjoy variety when they're thinking about their diet. Like they don't like to be restricted. They like to eat the things that they like. But when there's too much variety built into the diet, executing it becomes hard. Like I had said before, like I eat the same breakfast pretty much every single day. And I found one of the deficits with diet plans is you get a meal plan written by someone else who doesn't know your taste preferences, doesn't know your cooking skills, doesn't know how hard it is for you to cook dinner 2 nights a week because you're trucking your kids all over the place. And so I wanted to create something that was easy for people to use. So you could say, I really like one of the most popular breakfasts are these pumpkin protein pancakes. So I really like the pumpkin protein pancakes. You could literally eat them every single day for breakfast, and it wouldn't change your results on the program. It's this modular meal plan system that I think is really kind of the other secret sauce to the diet, because it allows executing the diet to be very simple. So if you like certain meals, you could eat those all the time. You don't like other meals I created, that's fine. You don't have to eat them. You personalize it to your taste preferences.
Awesome. We'll put the link to that in the show notes as well so people can see that book. I also wanted to ask you about supplements. I know I'm opening a huge can of worms here, but can you give us a bit of, I think you even have a memory supplement yourself. Can you give us a bit of an opinion on supplements? A lot of people are saying you shouldn't take supplements. Other nutritionists are saying you should. You need to find out what you need. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think that supplements can be really valuable because what research shows us is that there are certain nutrients that if you get them in highly concentrated doses on a regular basis, there are really great benefits that you can have. And these are things that you couldn't do normally. Like we could use Beet Elite for an example. There's no way I'm eating 6 beets at 5 o'clock in the morning every single day before my workout, right? Like it's just not going to happen. But I could eat like the 2 scoops of Beet Elite and drink it in 8 ounces of water. Like that's doable. And so I think supplements can be valuable if they take something and concentrate it and use it in a way that's beneficial, that allows for increased consistency. Fish oil supplements is another great example. Most people don't eat fish on a regular basis. Like in America, that's just kind of how it is. And so a fish oil supplement, like you still want to get the benefits of EPA and DHA. And so you just take a fish oil supplement every day. That's a good benefit. Something like a vitamin C supplement, I think it's a total waste of money. Like you don't need more vitamin C, right? If you're eating vegetables at every meal, you're going to get enough vitamin C. And there's not really good research to show that more vitamin C is better. And so I think those kinds of supplements are not valuable. I think that there are a lot of supplements on the market that use like cell kind of test tube research and animal research, to make assessments or comments about benefits in humans. And I think those supplements are also not good, and kind of not worth your money. So I think if you were going to look at a top list of what supplements people should take, think a vitamin D supplement, a fish oil supplement, a protein supplement, whether it's like a branched chain amino acids, how I explained, like I use them in my diet, or just like a whey protein or some other sort of protein shake. It's just a very good tool and a way to get protein in your diets. And a multivitamin. One of the things with the MetaShred diet was I went through and created these 14-day diet plans. And then I think I created 5 versions at each calorie level, and then did a nutritional assessment to see what vitamins and minerals were deficient. Because when you eat a lower calorie diet, you're going to be deficient in certain vitamins and minerals. And so in the book, I lay out look, when we did all these iterations, these are kind of where you're going to be low on vitamins and minerals, these specific ones. And so here's how you can rectify it. And it's really just kind of with a simple multivitamin. I also recommend a magnesium supplement. I think magnesium is another good supplement for people. People generally don't get enough magnesium, and it's used in over 300 reactions in the body. So that's also kind of really important. Then when you kind of look at what are next level things, creatine is a great, inexpensive, very safe supplement that, I really think everyone should take. I think there's potentially some cognitive benefits also for creatine. There's some really kind of interesting non-muscle power related benefits of creatine. Creatine's another supplement that people take. You mentioned, I've formulated a brain supplement. It was kind of through my work with professional athletes and some of the executives, they're always kind of looking for that kind of extra mental edge. And kind of as more people in my life have gotten older, I've started thinking like, what could we do to improve brain function? So I've started kind of looking at nutrition through the idea of brain function. And the supplement is called Cerevan. And it's actually the primary ingredient. This is another kind of good example of what I was talking about, is a spearmint. It's a special kind of spearmint extract. And to get the amount of antioxidants in one dose of that supplement, you need to eat 50 pounds of regular spearmint leaves. So it's like you could never do that, but through a supplement, now you're able to get that benefit. And so I think kind of across the board, that's where supplements are valuable. And what Cerevan, there are now 6 clinical studies on the ingredients in it. And 2 are published and 2 more will be published soon. It basically shows increase with focus and attention, increase in working memory, which is basically kind of the science term for multitasking. And then there's some new research that was just published in June or July at the International Society of Sports Nutrition Conference showing that it improves reaction time and accuracy of your reaction time, which is really, I think, interesting for people who are in kind of the mixed martial arts or kind of combat type sports, but also I think people in CrossFit who are doing a little more kind of explosive type activity. It's a really cool supplement that I spent a lot of time kind of researching and developing, and the effects are also very, profound.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely link to that in the show notes as well. Just back on creatine quickly, can you tell us, obviously it's another one, like you mentioned, that is taken off. How would you actually use that?
The thing with creatine is your body makes some and you get it in the diet, but you don't get enough. The benefit which research shows us comes when we supersaturate our muscles with creatine. And so that's really only achieved through supplementation. In order to do that, you can load. So you basically to stuff your muscles full of creatine, you could supplement every day and then eventually, they'll become full, or you could load with creatine. And either approach is, in my opinion, is fine. So to load, you do 5 grams 5 times a day for 5 days. That will kind of accelerate the process of super saturating your muscle with creatine. Or you could just do 5 grams of creatine, which is basically a teaspoon after exercise every day. And if you do that, then kind of eventually over time, you'll supersaturate your muscle creatine stores. There's no time-dependent variable on like you shouldn't take it before exercise or after exercise. Like exercise doesn't impact your body's ability to take up creatine. It's actually more driven by the hormone insulin, which, when you consume carbohydrates, your body, releases insulin. So I generally recommend that people consume their creatine when they're going to have their larger carbohydrate meal. So for me, when I take my branched chain amino acid shake right after I work out, creatine will be mixed in that as well, because I know when I have my breakfast, that's definitely my largest carbohydrate meal of the day. And so basically what happens is that creatine transporters, insulin helps activate those at the muscular level. So if insulin's present, it's going to help drive creatine into your muscles better. There's a lot of different kinds of creatine out there. And I would say, don't get sucked in by the hype. Kind of the original, it's called creatine monohydrate. Like when I was 14 and creatine really came on the scene, this was the creatine that was available, and that's still the best stuff. Just look for micronized creatine monohydrate. Micronized just means they're chopped up really small, so it dissolves a little bit better because creatine has poor solubility. It doesn't dissolve very well. So micronized creatine monohydrate is all you need. All the other, creatines are often called kind of designer creatines. There's really no evidence to show that it works any better. A lot of the marketing of those creatine products gets at these so-called kind of side effects of creatine that, regular creatine causes bloating and cramping and things like that. The scientific data on creatine does not support any of those claims. Just good old micronized creatine monohydrate.
And what sort of benefits would we get from or notice from the creatine?
Creatine gets you the biggest benefit. Basically, it helps your body regenerate ATP faster. And so you get the biggest benefit from creatine when you're doing things that are short bursts of activity. So that last somewhere less than 10 seconds. So kind of sprints or, powerful lifts. Those are really when you're going to get like low rep lifts or anything explosive. That's when you get the biggest benefit from creatine. But there's some other research showing that there might be a cognitive benefit of creatine, especially if you follow a vegetarian diet, because you're not going to be getting as much creatine from your diet because you generally get it in meats. So if you follow a vegetarian diet, I feel like creatine should be on your must consume list as well. There's actually some other interesting research to show that it can actually reduce muscle pain associated with statins. So if you're on like a statin cholesterol lowering drug and have muscle pain, that creatine supplementation can help reduce that muscle pain, which is very common for a lot of people on statins.
Right. Look, I feel like I could talk to you about this all day, but I know we're time limited here, so I've just got to ask you one more question.
Yeah.
But before I do, can you give us any final tip or anything that you'd like to remind our audience about, something that I guess they can take home and implement into their lives?
My advice would be, when you're setting your fitness goal or your nutrition goal, to set two different goals. And I talk about this in the MetaShred Diet book. You set your big global goal, and then you set the execution goals. So let's say you want to lose 10 pounds. That's your big goal. But losing 10 pounds is not something you can do every day. Like, you can't step on the scale and say, I'm losing 10 pounds. But what you can do is you can eat protein at every meal. You can eat a vegetable at every meal. Those are your execution goals. And if you focus on a day-to-day basis on your execution goals, they're going to bring you to your global goal. And so focus on the things that you can affect. And those are your execution goals. And then eventually you're going to reach that global goal. And I think that's where people can get really frustrated with their diet or with their results, is they'll set these big goals. I want to lose 10 pounds. But on a day-to-day basis, they're not holding themselves accountable to the actions that are required to get there. It doesn't need to be complicated. Just pick 2 or 3 execution goals and get really good at them. You'll make really good progress.
I like that. Simple approach. Love it. And one little personal question that we ask all our guests on the show. Do you have a tattoo?
I don't have a tattoo, actually.
I thought somewhere on that leg there must be a tattoo.
just scars from dragging the bar up it.
Have you ever considered?
When I was younger, I was like, a tattoo would be cool. And my wife was like, really? I don't know if that could be that cool. And then I'm kind of like, nah, I'm glad I didn't. I don't know. Yeah, no, I guess I'm not really a tattoo kind of guy.
Awesome. Look, thanks again, Dr. Mike. Really, really great to have you on the show. I'll put all the links to your websites, your books and everything in the show notes. And thanks again.
Yeah, no, this has been awesome. Thanks so much for having me as a guest.
For all the resources and show notes from today's episode, please go to www.ali.fitness. If you liked today's episode, please show your appreciation by going to iTunes, give us a 5-star review and subscribe.